nobody, particularly now, the cost of living crisis, nobody goes out, does all this shopping, puts it away, does all these things with an intention to waste food. We absolutely know that. And we also know that there's no finger pointing, there's no blame, there's no shame. It's a series of things that contribute to household food waste. It might be used by best before dates. It might be the way we package things. It's convenience. There's a whole range of things.
Hello and welcome to Season 3 of Food Waste Matters, the podcast where we tackle the issue of food waste head on. Every episode, we meet with individuals who are actively working to make our food systems more sustainable. From dedicated researchers to creative entrepreneurs, we share the stories and insights that push us all to think and act differently about the food we consume and the waste we produce. And why are we focusing on this? Because reducing food waste is crucial for tackling climate change, saving energy, and securing a sustainable future for our planet. Here at Food Waste Matters, our goal is to provide you with knowledge and motivation through real-life examples and expert advice. So let's meet our guest today and hear what they're doing in their fight against food waste. Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Joanne Freeman, your host from Honey & Fox. Today we're starting strong with an important discussion about a national campaign making waves in the food waste reduction space. But before we meet our guest, let's talk about why food waste is such a critical issue and how it ties into a global effort that many people may not even know about, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs for short. Now, these goals were adopted in 2015 by countries around the world as part of a historic commitment to address the most pressing challenges we face, and that is ending poverty, protecting the planet, and ensuring prosperity for us all. Now, one of these goals, and they call it the SDG 12, so the Sustainable Development Goal number 12, focuses on ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns. So under the SDG 12, they just love their acronyms, is the target called 12.3, which sets an ambitious but vital aim, which is to halve per capita global food waste at the retail and consumer levels and reduce food losses across production and supply chains, including post-harvest losses, by 2030. So in other words, it wants to be able to halve food waste right through the supply chain. But why does this matter? Consider this. 1/3 of all food produced globally for human consumption is lost or wasted. That inefficiency costs $940 billion annually. And this waste consumes 1/4 of all water used in agriculture, requires land the size of China, and is responsible for around 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions. It's a staggering problem with wide-reaching consequences for us all. But here's the good news. Reducing food loss and waste is a win on every level. For households, businesses, and our farmers, it saves money. For communities, it helps address food insecurity by ensuring more food reaches the people that need it most. And for the planet, it eases the pressure on climate, water, and land resources. Now, while the solutions may vary between developed countries like Australia and developing countries, this global target requires everyone to play a part. Whether you're a consumer, a business, or a policymaker, tackling food waste is more than just saving our leftovers. It's about driving meaningful change for our future. So, in today's episode, we will meet Mandy Hall, the driving force behind the Great Unwaste, which is a campaign focusing on reducing food waste across Australian households. So, Mandy's work encourages households to make simple changes that collectively have a big impact on their wallets, the planet, and their community. Mandy's really passionate about sustainability and finding achievable solutions, and she believes that food waste is one of the easiest ways we can all start making a difference. The Great Unwaste provides everyday Australians with the tools and tips they need to waste less and make smarter choices, turning what might otherwise end up in the bin into an opportunity to save money and protect our environment. So through this campaign, Mandy is helping to spark conversations and actions that make sustainable living feel accessible to us all. I'm really looking forward to our conversation about how we can all help to reduce food waste.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So let's just dive right in, Mandy. What inspired the Great Unwaste campaign?
Well, I think, you've worked with us for a while. You understand, the depth of the problem of food waste in Australia. And of course, I was lucky enough to come in at the end of what was a huge body of research that was undertaken by End Food Waste Australia, CRC. I think it was about 3.5 years to understand the magnitude of the issue of household food waste in Australia. And across the supply chain, unfortunately, household food waste is the largest contributor at around 32%. So we know that something needs to be done. And of course, there's been a range of efforts out there across Australia over the years. And we just weren't making the impact that we had hoped for all of us. We're all in this together. There's no one organisation that's fighting this fight. And so after a really long process, taking that data, really understanding what was going on in Australia and globally in terms of food waste avoidance campaigns, and particularly households, I'm cutting it really short because it was an enormous process, but the Great Unwaste was then born.
And so you've discussed why this household area, is such a significant focus. So how big an impact can households really have on overall food waste reduction in Australia?
Look, it's huge. If you think about that 7.6 million tonnes that goes to landfill in Australia every year, and you think that households are the current largest contributor to that, obviously the impact and the change of habits has a significant impact on the reduction of that number and food that's going to landfill. 32% is a lot. And of course, we know that nobody, particularly now in the cost of living crisis, nobody goes out, does all this shopping, puts it away, does all these things with an intention to waste food. We absolutely know that. And we also know that there's no finger pointing, there's no blame, there's no shame. It's a series of things that contribute to household food waste. It might be used by best before dates. It might be the way we package things. It's convenience. There's a whole range of things. But getting Australians to stop for a minute and just think about their contribution alone has impact, let alone those really simple, relatable habits that they can make and change. The effect would be enormous, really enormous.
So the Great Unwaste is a fantastic website, but it's more than just a website. What else does the Great Unwaste provide? So why should people, consumers, households go to the Great Unwaste website?
Well, outside of the website, we also have a large social media campaign. You would also have seen us in press, outdoor advertising, radio. the website itself is there as a resource. It's full of tools and tips and tricks, and our social media will feed into that. So you'll see some celebrities around Australia, or some, everyday mums and dads and individuals and grannies and everybody chipping in to talk about how they reduce food waste at home. So it becomes a resource, a helpful resource to find ways to help you reduce your food waste at home. And not only that, it's about beautiful food at the end of the day as well. We have this amazing food in Australia, and we want everybody to make the most of that. And what is also crucial is us supporting food rescue endeavours to make sure all that food that we put all these resources into growing and producing in Australia, that it ends up on the plates of people in Australia and not in the bin.
So, Mandy, what are some of those tools or resources on the website?
So you'll see that there are tips and tricks. It might be how to store food, how to prepare a really good shopping list, how to menu plan or meal plan, which I know people's eyes glaze over and they go, oh, God. And we're not talking about being perfect or writing down every meal. What we're saying is, think about planning for a change of plans. Think about that you have a busy life, or you might have kids that have sport, or you have a busy social life, etc. Think about all those things, and maybe just leave space in that meal plan for the unexpected, or for those nights that you're super busy and takeaway is going to be your best option, or a meal kit or something. We don't always have to plan or shop for every meal for every day of the week. You'll see tips around using leftovers and great recipe ideas. And as I said, we launched on September 29, so we're not that old yet. And as we progress and we get more feedback from the Australian public and from industry and from our government associates from each state and territory who have had involvement in food waste avoidance, the website will change and grow.
I'm a really great advocate now about this meal planning, because like most of us, I lead a really busy life, and the last thing I want to do at night is not only cook, but think about what to cook. So I meal plan now on the weekend. I only buy my ingredients or products for that meal plan. So not only am I saving myself time and stress, more important for me, but I always have yummy food to eat, whether it be leftovers or new meals that I'm planning for. So I'm a fantastic advocate.
Meal planning. Yeah, it's great. Meal planning is great.
It really, really works.
Yeah, it does. And, from a meal plan, you write a shopping list. You tend to stick to that shopping list because your meals are planned out. I'm glad you raised leftovers. It's a huge thing. It's a massive thing. We need to lose that kind of old mindset that makes it seem like eating leftovers is a cop-out somehow, or it's less than. When in fact, certainly from me, from a foodie background, leftovers, magnificent. They're the additional flavor that comes in over that 24-hour period or that 48-hour period is extraordinary. It saves you money. It saves you time. And then you can take leftovers and create whole new dishes again. So leftovers is another really great way, of course, of reducing food waste at home.
And someone's been listening to me, in the ether, because I noticed the other night when I was watching SBS, the Great Unwaste ad just happened to pop up.
Yeah, so that's you must have paused, because what happens is we have these wonderful pause ads where when people pause on Netflix, SBS, hopefully from time to time they're going to see the Great Unwaste. And it is about, behaviour change is a long game. We all know that. And the Great Unwaste is a behaviour change campaign. And in the same way that, Australians would never think anymore about throwing rubbish out of their car window as they were going along, or leaving rubbish in the park, or, going out on a really hot day and not putting sunscreen on. In the same way that's just an automatic behaviour for the majority of us now in Australia, we need to get to that same space with food waste. It's really important. It needs to become automatic. And that will happen over time, but you need lots of exposure to this messaging to remind you to think about how you contribute to that.
And so I just want to unpack that a little bit more, Mandy. The campaign talks about food waste affecting people, the planet, and, importantly, our pockets.
Yeah.
Can you explain this connection between food waste and these three Ps, if you like, and how small changes at home can make such a big impact?
Yeah, look, I think I'll start with that. These small changes, what you see in the Great Unwaste, to some people, it may appear that it's really simple or obvious. But what we know from that 3.5 years of research is these are the habits that we talk about, or the behaviors that we talk about, are the largest contributors to household food waste. So making those small changes, as I said, may seem, oh, look, really, is that going to make a difference? It's going to make an enormous difference. We know that that's what contributes, and so changing them will also be the largest impactors that we have. Of course, when we talk about the planet, food waste rotting in landfill, the gases extraordinary. Climate change is a real thing for all of us, and of course, those gases that come from food waste rotting in landfill is significant. Also, if we think about the cost to produce and grow food in Australia, the use of electricity, transporting it, water, time. And, I talk about this a lot, but I think it's really important for a lot of producers and farmers, the love and the passion that goes into growing that food. They grow it so that it makes its way to your table and you eat it and it nourishes you and you get joy from it. Food is associated with everything we do in life, from, the really saddest and most tragic of times. Food will be involved there somehow, to the celebrations, to our everyday living. And we need to remember and respect those times and get the joy back into food. So the planet is one thing. People, of course, cost of living, you raised before, food is expensive. It really is. And we just cannot afford to waste it. People are needing that money to survive, or to pay bills, or hopefully to have some extra enjoyment in life. So it is about preserving that. And it seems so pointless, obviously, to spend that money and then see it go in the bin. Time is another thing. Everybody is time poor, whether you've got young kids, a busy job, you volunteer all the time, all walks of life, all across Australia, every state. We all need more time. And of course, those habits that we refer to in the Great Unwaste, sticking to them as best you can will save you a lot of time.
So, Mandy, while the Great Unwaste campaign focuses on households,
Yeah.
what role do you think businesses and indeed government policies are playing, creating this system where it's easier for households to reduce food waste?
Look, I mean, that's a huge question that we could spend a whole podcast on. But there are simple things, if we're talking about something that's consumer facing and that would help consumers. There are simple things that can be done. I will dive for a second into the food rescue space and say, the tax incentives that we most of us will have been reading about, those changes, making those changes go through and become policy would have a significant impact. We know that would help farmers, help food rescue. But I'll push that to the side for the moment. The policies we have around, or the information we have around packaging, use by dates, best before, all of those things play an enormous part. For industry, I think it is looking at ways to help educate their consumer. Make it easy in store, put some information. It might be something as simple as, a sticker near the apples that says, if you store me in the fridge, I'll last 5 times longer. For manufacturers, unpack information that tells you how to care for that product. Is it that you get halfway through a loaf of bread and it has a sticker on it that says, freeze me now? All of those things, we all have a part to play. And yes, when we talk about household food waste being the largest contributor, there are many things that make up household food waste. And a lot of that are the things that I've just mentioned, the way in which industry plays a part, policy plays a part, government plays a part. It's up to all of us to assist an Australian public to reduce their food waste, for sure.
So can we go back to government policy? So what are they doing now?
Well, I think if you look, the Great Unwaste is here as a result of the Commonwealth supplying us with seed funding to get it up and going. So without that seed funding, the Great Unwaste wouldn't exist. And I think that's an enormous step and a brave step, for a federal government. It's so important. This work is so incredibly important. And that seed funding is the only way in which we would get a unified voice. When we were lucky enough to receive the grant from the Commonwealth, the first thing we did was look at never recreating the wheel. So we went out, we spoke to every state and territory to understand their situation. What do they face? What's important to them and the people who live in those states? We did the same with industry. We talked about how can we make it easier for you to help the consumer. The policy changes will come through. You know, we know that there is discussion around packaging. We know that there is discussion around tax reform for food rescue. We're all working. I think we're trying to work. This is probably the closest everybody has been to joining together to solve the problem under one umbrella that's ever happened in this space. And as I said, we've just begun. You know, September 29 is when we launch. But what we do need is we do need everybody to want to work and come under that umbrella. You know, you can retain your own brand and still be a part of this, because it is about creating that movement. It is about creating an automatic response from Australians that says we won't waste food. We know that this is not good for us to do so. So industry to jump on board, every state and territory to jump on board, the Commonwealth to continue the relationship with us. If we can keep that going, we absolutely have this capacity to make enormous impact.
So, Mandy, the Great Unwaste campaign or license or logo or message, is that something that businesses can use to promote what they're doing around reducing waste?
That's a great question. As I mentioned earlier, the Great Unwaste was born from 3.5 years worth of enormous body of research, and everything we have done right up until right now when I'm talking to you, and we will continue to do, is all about evidence, credibility and science. So, you know, we've had behavioral scientists work on the campaign. We've obviously researchers. We have all the data. And yes, you can collaborate with the Great Unwaste as a brand. Would we just give the logo away? Absolutely not, because what we're here for is we're here to help an Australian public. We're here to make sure that we're educating, we're providing a service, we're giving information that is really going to help them reduce household food waste. And so would we love to partner with a bread brand per se? You know, when I talked about putting the label on, it says freeze me now. Absolutely, we would love. And if we get an indication that you're going to help a consumer, we're there with you every step of the way. So it is about that, for want of a better word, due diligence process. You know, I need to make sure every tool that you have is there really to help the consumer. Every claim you make will help them reduce household food waste or change behavior. And that's our criteria. So it's pretty good criteria, really. And so, yes, and then we would love to partner with people. Partnering with like-minded people who are here to help a nation is really what we're all about.
So, Mandy, as we wrap up, if there was one key message you want Australians to take away from the Great Unwaste campaign, what would it be?
Oh, you know, it's interesting because the campaign says, its opening line is, are you wasting more than you think? And we asked that question for one reason. We tested that question over and over again. And what it does is just give us this moment to pause and say, actually, what am I doing? Am I wasting more than I think? Because it is at that point in time in which you'll be receptive to change and you'll want to inquire and you'll want to find ways to help yourself and your family and your friends and neighbours and community. You know, we are hoping to be that one voice that's really helpful for the whole of the nation.
Well, Mandy, that wraps up our conversation today. So it's clear that tackling food waste isn't just about saving money. It's about creating a positive impact for our planet, our community, and of course, our future generations. So, Mandy, thanks so much for joining us today on Food Waste Matters and sharing with us the incredible work you're doing in the Great Unwaste campaign.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to chat.
If you'd like to learn more about the Great Unwaste campaign, head over to their website at www.thegreatwaste.com.au. Mandy also mentioned the significant amount of consumer research that has been done to help inform the Great Unwaste campaign. She also talked briefly about the R&D tax incentive for food relief, and she also highlighted the work being done in the food packaging space. So I've included all of these links to all of these projects in the show notes. And Mandy also briefly shared the consumer research that had been done around labelling. So to find out more about this research, you can go to the Food Waste Matters Season 2, have a look for episode 19, where we had a really interesting conversation with Associate Professor Lucas Parker for RMIT University about best before labelling and use by date labelling. Once again, I've included the link in the podcast show notes. And if you're curious about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, including the 12.3 target, you can visit the United Nations website for more information, which I've also included in our show notes. As always, if you have any questions, feedback, or a story about how you're reducing food waste, we'd love to hear from you. Just drop us an email on foodwastematters@honeyandfox.com.au. And if you want to check out all our previous podcast episodes, just head to www.foodwastematters.com.au. So thanks for tuning in to this episode of Food Waste Matters. Together, let's keep this conversation going and continue finding ways to reduce food waste in our lives. So until next time.